September 19, 1944. Lieutenant Colonel Creighton Abrams stood in a Belgian field, his mud-caked boots planted firmly beside a captured German Panther tank. The beast of German engineering sat silent, its long 75mm gun pointing accusingly at the gray autumn sky. Round him, his tank commanders from the 3rd to 7th Tank Battalion gathered, their faces showing a mixture of curiosity and skepticism. They had come to evaluate whether American crews should adopt these supposedly superior German machines that Wehrmacht tankers had abandoned during the rapid Allied advance through France. The question seemed obvious to the strategists back in headquarters. The Panther outgunned the Sherman in every measurable way. Its sloped armor could deflect American shells from distances that would turn a Sherman into a funeral pyre. Its main gun could penetrate Sherman armor from nearly 2,000 yards. American intelligence reports, some source from assessments by the United States Army Ordnance Department, confirmed what every tanker already knew from bitter experience. In a one-on-one duel, the Panther would win almost every time. The Sherman had earned a grim nickname among its crews, the Ronson, after the cigarette lighter, because it lights first time, every time. Yet as Abrams watched his men circle the captured Panther, he noticed something unexpected. Instead of excitement, he saw wariness. Sergeant Lafayette Poole, one of the war's most successful tank aces with 12 confirmed tank kills, ran his hand along the Panther's track assembly and shook his head slowly. Technical Sergeant Robert Early climbed down from the driver's hatch after just 10 minutes inside, his expression darkening. "Sir, with respect," Early began, choosing his words carefully, "I wouldn't trade my Sherman for 10 of these things." The statement seemed absurd on its surface. The Sherman marked for weight 33 tons and carried a 75mm gun that could barely scratch a Panther's frontal armor beyond 500 yards. The Panther weighed 45 tons, possessed vastly superior armor protection, and mounted a gun that could destroy any Allied tank in Europe. German propaganda called it the finest medium tank in the world, and Allied intelligence reluctantly agreed. American tankers had learned to fear the Panther's distinctive profile on the battlefield, that angular turret and long gun barrel that meant death approached. But Early's complaint opened a floodgate of observations from the other experienced crews. The Panther's transmission, they noted, was absurdly unreliable. Its interleaved road wheel design, while providing excellent cross-country performance, became a maintenance nightmare when mud froze between the wheels during winter operations. The engine required constant attention and guzzled fuel at an alarming rate. Most damningly, when something broke, and things broke constantly, German over-engineering meant repairs required specialized tools and expertise that American maintenance crews simply did not possess. Abrams listened as his men cataloged the Panther's flaws with the authority of soldiers, who understood that superior specifications on paper meant nothing. When a tank sat broken beside the road while the battle moved forward without it, the discussion that afternoon would become legendary in American armored doctrine. A moment when experienced warriors rejected the theoretically superior weapon for reasons that transcended firepower and armor thickness. The Sherman, for all its deadly vulnerabilities, possessed qualities that its crews valued more than survival in a single engagement: reliability, maintainability, and the absolute certainty that it would keep fighting. March 7, 1945. Staff Sergeant Clarence Moyer guided his Sherman Easy 8 through the rubble-choked streets of Cologne, the cathedral's broken spires visible through the smoke and dust that hung over the devastated city. His tank, nicknamed Eagle 7, had crossed the Atlantic Ocean, fought through France, survived the Battle of the Bulge, and now prowled deep into Germany itself. The same tank, the same engine, the same transmission that had never failed him when he needed it most. Moyer had seen plenty of knocked-out Panthers during the advance across Europe. Surprisingly few showed battle damage. Most sat abandoned beside roads, victims of mechanical failure rather than American guns. The Panther's Maybach engine, a masterpiece of German engineering, delivered impressive power when it functioned properly. But the phrase "when it functioned properly" carried enormous weight in actual combat conditions. The transmission, in particular, earned a reputation for catastrophic failure. According to captured German maintenance records examined by Allied intelligence, Panthers required major transmission overhauls after just 150 kilometers of operation. The Sherman's transmission could operate for thousands of kilometers between overhauls. The difference manifested in brutal arithmetic on the battlefield. A Panther company might begin an operation with 17 tanks, but within days, only 8 or 9 remain operational. The others sat scattered along the route of advance, waiting for specialized recovery vehicles that might never arrive, requiring spare parts that the collapsing German logistics system could not deliver. Meanwhile, American Sherman companies maintained their strength because their tanks simply kept running. Corporal William McVeigh, a maintenance specialist with the 3rd Armored Division, explained the practical reality during a rest period behind the lines. "You can fix a Sherman with a hammer, some wire, and a creative vocabulary," he said, his hands stained with grease as he worked on an engine compartment. "The components are simple, accessible, and interchangeable. We can swap an entire engine in the field within hours. The Panther? You need a factory and a team of specialists. That thing is so over-engineered that replacing a final drive requires practically disassembling the entire tank." This philosophy of mechanical simplicity came from American industrial doctrine, particularly the influence of Detroit's automotive manufacturers, who had converted to military production. Companies like Chrysler, Ford, and General Motors brought mass production efficiency to tank construction. They designed the Sherman for maintainability from the start, understanding that a moderately effective tank that remained operational possessed more value than a supremely lethal tank that sat broken. The Sherman's radial engine, originally designed for aircraft, proved remarkably robust. The Continental Radial 9 produced 400 horsepower and, more importantly, tolerated abuse that would destroy more temperamental power plants. It ran on standard 80-octane gasoline that American logistics could supply in enormous quantities. The Panther's Maybach required higher quality fuel and constant adjustment to maintain proper function. German tankers joked bitterly that their tanks were mechanical princesses, demanding perfect conditions and specialized attention. Lieutenant Colonel John Brown Wilson, in his post-war analysis compiled for the United States Army Armor School at Fort Knox, emphasized this reliability gap as the decisive factor in armored warfare effectiveness. "A tank," he wrote, "is not a dueling weapon. It is a tool of mobile warfare. The side that can maintain mobility maintains the initiative. The Sherman gave us mobility. The Panther, for all its fearsome specifications, could not maintain operational readiness sufficient for sustained campaigning." American tankers internalized this lesson thoroughly. They understood their Sherman might lose an individual engagement against a Panther, but they also knew their Sherman would reach the battlefield while the Panther sat broken. That certainty, that reliability, became worth more than thicker armor or a more powerful gun. November 22, 1944. The port of Antwerp, Belgium, hummed with activity as Liberty ships disgorged their cargo onto the docks. Mountains of supplies stretched across the waterfront: fuel drums, ammunition crates, food containers, and spare parts. Among those supplies, Sherman tank components arrived in standardized quantities, prepackaged and cataloged for rapid distribution to frontline units. The logistics miracle that made American armor effective was on full display, a symphony of industrial might and organizational efficiency that German forces could not replicate. Captain James Bates, a logistics officer with the 1st Army Supply Command, supervised the distribution of tank parts to forward maintenance depots. His records told a striking story. The Sherman, produced by multiple manufacturers across America, maintained remarkable parts interchangeability. A transmission from a Chrysler-built Sherman could replace a failed unit in a Ford-manufactured tank. Track links, road wheels, engine components, weapons systems all followed standardized specifications. That simplified the supply chain enormously. "We can keep 70% of our Sherman force operational indefinitely," Bates explained to visiting officers from Supreme Headquarters Allied Expeditionary Force. "The parts flow is predictable. The quantities required are manageable, and every mechanic knows the Sherman's architecture. Intimately, we've created a system that defeats attrition through sheer industrial replacement capacity." This system stood in stark contrast to the German armored forces supply nightmare. The Wehrmacht-operated Panthers, Tigers, Tiger IIs, Panzer IVs, Panzer IIIs, and various assault guns simultaneously. Each vehicle required different spare parts, different ammunition, different maintenance procedures. Even within a single vehicle type like the Panther, different production variants from different factories meant parts might not be interchangeable. A road wheel from an early production Panther manufactured by MAN might not fit a late production Panther from Daimler-Benz. Captured German logistics documents, examined by Allied intelligence officers and later referenced in the United States Strategic Bombing Survey reports, revealed the catastrophic complexity of German armored supply chains. A German tank battalion required tracking hundreds of different part numbers across multiple vehicle types. When Panthers broke down far from German supply depots, Obtaining correct replacement parts became nearly impossible. Many Panthers were scuttled and abandoned simply because the specific part needed was unavailable, even though German factories might be producing that exact part for other units. The ammunition supply situation further highlighted the disparity. Sherman tanks fired 7.5mm rounds. That fit guns across multiple Allied vehicle types, including tank destroyers and self-propelled artillery. American factories produced these rounds in enormous quantities, and the standardized ammunition meant supply confusion rarely occurred. Every Sherman tank could be resupplied from the same ammunition stocks. Panthers fired a different 7.5mm round, longer and more powerful. That fit only the Panthers' KWK-42 gun and a few other specialized weapons. This meant dedicated ammunition supply chains that could not draw from general stocks. When Panther units ran low on ammunition, they could not borrow from nearby Panzer for units whose shorter 7.5mm rounds were incompatible. German tankers sometimes found themselves with operational tanks but no ammunition, sitting helplessly as American forces maneuvered around them. Fuel consumption exacerbated these problems. The Panther's powerful Maybach engine and 4 to 5 ton weight meant it consumed fuel voraciously. It managed roughly 0.8 kilometers per liter of fuel, compared to the Sherman's 1.9 kilometers per liter. In practical terms, a Panther battalion required more than twice the fuel delivery of a Sherman battalion for equivalent operational movement. As Allied aircraft strangled German fuel production and supply lines, Panthers increasingly sat immobilized while Shermans continued operating. American tankers understood these realities instinctively. Their survival depended not just on the tank itself, but on the vast logistical apparatus behind them that ensured spare parts, ammunition, and fuel arrived consistently. The captured Panther might be mechanically superior, but it existed within a supply ecosystem that could not sustain it. January 15, 1945. Corporal Nicholas Maslonic pulled himself from the burning wreckage of his Sherman tank near Bastogne, Belgium, his uniform smoking, but his body intact. It was his second tank that month. The first had taken an anti-tank round through the turret. He had walked away from that one too. Around him in the Ardennes snow, other American tankers regrouped after the German counteroffensive, many of them survivors of knocked-out Shermans who had returned to combat in replacement vehicles within days. This phenomenon, Sherman crews surviving tank losses and returning to combat, represented a dimension of tank warfare that pure technical specifications could not capture. The Sherman earned its death trap reputation because it caught fire easily when penetrated. The gasoline engine and ammunition storage made it vulnerable to catastrophic burns. Yet paradoxically, Sherman crews survived tank losses at higher rates than their German counterparts in supposedly better protected vehicles. The reason lay in escape routes. American designers, perhaps learning from earlier tank designs, gave the Sherman multiple exit hatches. The turret featured hatches for both the commander and lower. The hull had hatches for the driver and bow gunner. Most importantly, the hull floor included an escape hatch that allowed crew to evacuate downward, using the tank's body as a shield against enemy fire. When a Sherman took a hit, crew members had multiple options for rapid egress. The Panther's design prioritized armor protection over crew escape. Its massive sloped frontal armor and side skirts created a protective shell, but that shell became a trap when the vehicle was hit. The Panther had fewer escape hatches, and those it possessed were more difficult to use quickly. The driver, positioned deep in the hull, faced a particularly harrowing escape route. Several American intelligence reports, compiled from interviews with captured German tankers, noted that Panther crews who survived vehicle loss often did so because they had already dismounted before the fatal hit occurred. Sergeant Lafayette Poole, whose crew had survived multiple Sherman losses during combat across France and Germany, articulated the psychological dimension. "You can fight harder when you believe you can survive," he explained during a rest period. "Every time we mount up, we know we might take a hit, but we also know we've got good odds of getting out alive." That confidence, that belief in survivability, it lets you be aggressive. You take calculated risks. You close with the enemy. Fear doesn't paralyze you because escape is possible. This aggressive mindset proved crucial in armored combat. American Sherman crews developed tactics that leveraged their numerical advantage and mechanical reliability while minimizing exposure to German guns. They used speed and maneuver, accepting that individual Shermans might be lost while the unit accomplished its objective. They could afford this approach because knocked-out crews often survived the fight again, preserving the irreplaceable element. Trained, experienced tankers. Technical Sergeant Robert Early, who commanded a Sherman in the 37th Tank Battalion, survived for tank losses during the war. Each time, he and most of his crew escaped the destroyed vehicle and returned to combat in a replacement. Sherman within days. The tank is just metal, he noted with the pragmatism of a combat veteran. Metal we can replace. The Detroit factories are cranking out Shermans faster than the Germans can knock them out. But experienced crews? Those take time to build. The Sherman's design recognizes that the crew's survival matters more than the tank's survival. German tankers, conversely, faced a grimmer calculus. Losing a Panther often meant losing the entire crew. Even if some crew members survived, the time required to replace a lost Panther meant those survivors might spend weeks out of combat while waiting for a new vehicle. The German army, bleeding trained personnel across all fronts, could not sustain these losses. By late 1944, Panther battalions operated with increasing numbers of inexperienced replacement crews who lacked the training and cohesion of their predecessors. American replacement doctrine addressed this systematically. When a Sherman crew survived a tank loss, they typically received a replacement vehicle within 48 to 72 hours. The steady stream of Shermans arriving from American factories ensured availability. This rapid replacement cycle maintained unit cohesion and preserved combat experience where it mattered most. In the minds and reflexes of veteran crews. April 9, 1945. The 3rd Armored Division's maintenance record showed a striking statistic. They had received 648 replacement Shermans since landing in Normandy 10 months earlier. Not 648 total tanks, 648 replacements for losses. Yet the division maintained combat effectiveness throughout, never falling below operational strength for more than brief periods. The American tank war in Europe succeeded not through technical superiority, but through overwhelming numerical advantage and replacement capacity that German forces could not match. American factories produced approximately 49,000 Sherman tanks during World War II. This staggering output dwarfed German production of all tank types combined. Germany manufactured approximately 6,000 Panthers during the war's final 3 years, a respectable number that represented sophisticated engineering and considerable industrial effort. While 6,000 Panthers could not overcome 49,000 Shermans through technical superiority alone, the arithmetic of industrial warfare favored the side that could sustain losses and maintain numerical advantage. Major General Maurice Rose, commanding the 3rd Armored Division until his death in March 1945, understood this calculus intimately. His tactical doctrine accepted Sherman losses as inevitable and planned accordingly, rather than seeking to avoid losses through defensive tactics. He emphasized aggressive maneuver that leveraged American numerical superiority. His divisions typically engaged German armor at ratios of 3 or 4 to 1, surrounding and overwhelming technically superior German tanks through coordinated attacks from multiple directions. This numerical approach generated significant American casualties, a reality that post-war critics would emphasize when condemning the Sherman as inadequate. However, commanders like Rose recognized that attempting to match German technical sophistication tank forte would have delayed American production, reduced the numbers available, and likely extended the war significantly. The Sherman represented a conscious choice: produce adequate tanks in overwhelming numbers, rather than superior tanks in limited quantities. Staff Sergeant John Duncan McVeigh, whose tank company participated in the race across France during August 1944, experienced this numerical advantage firsthand. We'd encounter a Panther, and yes, we'd probably lose a tank or two engaging it, he recalled in post-war interviews. But we had 4 tanks for every one of theirs. While one Sherman distracted from the front, others flanked and got shots into the side or rear armor where our guns could penetrate. It wasn't pretty and it cost lives, but it worked. The Germans couldn't replace their losses, we could. American intelligence reports, later compiled in the European Theater of Operations Historical Studies, documented German armored strength declining throughout 1944 and 1945. Despite the Panthers' technical superiority, German tank divisions that began the Normandy campaign with 150 tanks frequently operated with fewer than 30. By autumn, American armored divisions, despite higher absolute losses, maintained authorized strength through continuous replacement. The industrial capacity behind this replacement flow represented America's decisive strategic advantage. Detroit's automotive factories had converted to military production with remarkable efficiency. Chrysler's tank arsenal in Warren, Michigan, alone produced approximately 25,000 tanks during the war. The Fisher tank arsenal in Grand Blanc, Michigan, added thousands more. Multiple manufacturers working from standardized designs created redundancy that ensured consistent output even if individual factories experienced problems. German industry, conversely, struggled with both resource constraints and Allied bombing. Panther production required sophisticated machine tools, high-grade steel alloys, and specialized components that became increasingly scarce as the war progressed. Allied strategic bombing targeted German industrial capacity systematically, disrupting production and forcing dispersal of manufacturing that reduced efficiency. Even when German factories managed to produce Panthers, transporting them to frontline units became difficult as Allied aircraft interdicted rail lines and roads. This production disparity created a peculiar battlefield dynamic. German tankers might win individual engagements through superior vehicles, but they fought a losing war of attrition. Every knocked-out Panther represented an irreplaceable loss. Every knocked-out Sherman was replaced within days. American tankers understood they operated within a system designed to absorb losses and maintain pressure. The captured Panther might be individually superior, but it existed outside the industrial ecosystem that made American armor truly effective. Adopting Panthers would have abandoned the decisive American advantage, the ability to maintain overwhelming numbers through industrial replacement capacity that Germany could not match. February 3, 1945. Fort Knox, Kentucky, bustled with activity as thousands of replacement tankers prepared for deployment to Europe. The Armored Schools training program emphasized speed and efficiency, producing crews capable of operating Shermans competently within 12 to 16 weeks. Instructors drilled students on the Sherman's controls, systems, and combat employment until the procedures became instinctive. The training philosophy reflected America's broader approach: produce competent crews quickly and in large numbers, rather than elite specialists slowly and in limited quantities. This training pipeline complemented the Sherman's design characteristics perfectly. The tank systems were intuitive and forgiving. The controls required less physical strength than German tanks, making them accessible to smaller recruits. The power traverse system for the turret used hydraulics rather than manual cranking, meaning gunners could track targets quickly without exhausting themselves. The gyro stabilizer, though imperfect, allowed firing while moving with reasonable accuracy, a capability German tanks lacked entirely. Lieutenant Colonel Wilson Edwards, an instructor at the Armored School, emphasized this accessibility during training sessions. The Sherman is a democratic tank, he explained to new crews. You don't need to be a mechanical genius or a physical specimen to operate it effectively. We've designed this system so that ordinary American soldiers can become competent tankers quickly. That's a strategic advantage that paper specifications don't capture. German tank training told a different story. Panther crews required extensive training, particularly drivers who faced complex transmission management and demanding driving characteristics. The Panther steering system used a dual-radius mechanism that required skill and experience to operate smoothly. Inexperienced drivers frequently damaged transmissions through improper technique, contributing to the Panther's mechanical unreliability. The German training system, designed to produce elite tank crews through lengthy intensive programs, could not scale to replace combat losses quickly. By late 1944, the quality gap became apparent on the battlefield. American Sherman crews, while individually less elite than their German counterparts, operated within a system that maintained consistent training standards and steady replacement flows. German Panther crews increasingly consisted of hastily trained replacements who lacked the skills necessary to maximize their vehicle's potential. A technically superior tank provided no advantage when operated by inexperienced crews making fundamental mistakes. Captain James Leach, who commanded a tank company in the 4th Armored Division, noted this quality decline among German opposition during the drive across France. Early in the campaign, we faced German tank crews who were clearly veterans, he recalled. They used terrain expertly, coordinated their movements, and fought tactically sound engagements. By autumn, we increasingly encountered German crews who made basic errors, exposing themselves unnecessarily, failing to use cover effectively, and showing poor coordination with supporting units. The Panthers they operated remained dangerous, but the crews couldn't fully exploit the vehicle's capabilities. The Sherman's simpler systems meant American crews reached minimum competency faster and could operate effectively with less experience. The power traverse allowed inexperienced gunners to engage targets successfully. The escape hatches meant crews survived losses and retained experience for subsequent engagements. The mechanical reliability made crews spend more time operating their vehicles and less time learning complex maintenance procedures. These characteristics, viewed holistically, created a human-machine system more effective than the sum of its individual components. American tactical doctrine evolved to exploit the Sherman's characteristics while minimizing its weaknesses, rather than emphasizing long-range gunnery duels where German tanks held advantages. American doctrine stressed maneuver, combined arms coordination, and aggressive closing to effective engagement ranges. Infantry armor cooperation became standard practice, with infantry providing security against German anti-tank weapons, while armor provided mobile firepower support. Artillery and air support integrated seamlessly with armored operations, providing capabilities that compensated for the Sherman's armor and gun deficiencies. German doctrine, conversely, expected Panthers and Tigers to dominate engagements through technical superiority. When that superiority failed to materialize due to mechanical breakdowns, supply shortages, or inexperienced crews, German tactical approaches often became ineffective. The Wehrmacht lacked the flexible, combined arms integration that characterized American operations, partly because German forces operated with inadequate infantry, artillery, and air support. By late 1944, Sergeant Forrest Dixon, a Sherman commander who fought from Normandy to Germany, summarized the training and doctrine advantages succinctly. "We weren't trying to be super soldiers in super tanks. We were ordinary guys in adequate tanks, backed by massive artillery, supported by overwhelming air power, and supplied by the world's greatest logistics system." That combination beat German technical superiority every time. The Panther might have been a better tank on paper, but we had a better system for winning wars. March 27, 1945. The maintenance depot behind American lines near the Rhine River processed a continuous stream of Sherman tanks requiring service and repair. Mechanics worked systematically through the rivals, replacing worn track, rebuilding engines, fixing damaged components. The process moved efficiently because every mechanic knew Sherman systems intimately and because spare parts arrived in predictable quantities. Across the Rhine, captured Panthers sat immobilized in German depots, waiting for specialized parts and expertise that would never arrive. The maintenance burden comparison between Shermans and Panthers revealed perhaps the most decisive practical difference between the vehicles. First Lieutenant William Thompson, a maintenance officer with the 2nd Armored Division, kept detailed records of man-hours required for various repair tasks. Replacing a Sherman transmission required approximately 8 man-hours with standard tools. The equivalent job on a Panther required 30 man-hours minimum, often much longer, and demanded specialized equipment including heavy lifting gear. To remove the entire frontal armor plate, the Panther's interleaved road wheel suspension provided excellent ride characteristics and ground pressure distribution, but created maintenance nightmares. Each side featured 8 large road wheels arranged in overlapping pattern, with torsion bar suspension. This design meant that replacing an inner road wheel required removing outer wheels first, sometimes 6 or 7 wheels to access a single damaged component. In winter conditions, mud froze between the interleaved wheels, sometimes completely immobilizing the tank until it could be moved to heated shelter for thawing. According to maintenance reports from the German 6th Panzer Army captured during the Battle of the Bulge, frozen suspension assemblies disabled more Panthers than combat action. During the initial phases of the offensive, Sherman suspension used vertical volute spring systems with bogies carrying the road wheels each. The design was simpler, more accessible, and dramatically easier to repair. Replacing a road wheel required removing a single bogie assembly, a job one mechanic could complete in under an hour with basic tools. Track maintenance, a constant necessity for any tracked vehicle, proceeded far more quickly on Shermans than Panthers. American maintenance crews routinely performed track repairs at night between daily operations, keeping vehicles operational. German crews often required multiple days to complete equivalent repairs on Panthers. Engine maintenance highlighted similar disparities. The Sherman's radial engine, while not perfect, could be removed and replaced as a complete unit. Maintenance depots stocked rebuilt engines ready for installation. A crew could swap engines in roughly 6 hours under field conditions for hours with proper facilities. The Panther's Maybach engine, more powerful but more complex, required substantially longer for removal and installation. More problematically, the engine's sophisticated fuel ejection and cooling systems required constant adjustment by skilled technicians. American mechanics, examining captured Panthers, often found them mechanically sound except for fuel delivery problems that German crews lacked the expertise to diagnose and repair. Captured German maintenance records, analyzed by United States Army technical intelligence officers, revealed the scale of the Panthers' maintenance burden. A typical Panther battalion required approximately 200 specialized maintenance personnel, including factory-trained technicians for complex repairs. Equivalent American Sherman battalions operated with roughly half that maintenance staff, relying on simpler systems that ordinary mechanics could service. As German losses mounted and trained technicians became scarce, Panther reliability collapsed further. Many Panthers sat abandoned not because they suffered catastrophic damage, but because the crews lacked the expertise to diagnose and repair relatively minor mechanical problems. Staff Sergeant Harold Johnson, a recovery vehicle operator with the 3rd Armored Division, spent considerable time examining abandoned Panthers during the advance across Germany. 9 times out of 10, the Panther we found sitting beside the road wasn't blown up or obviously damaged. He noted, "It just stopped working, and the crew couldn't fix it." We'd find Panthers with thrown tracks, empty fuel tanks, seized engines from overheating, transmission failures, mechanical problems that should have been repairable in the field. But the German crews either didn't have the parts, didn't have the tools, or didn't have the knowledge to fix them. Our Shermans had problems too, but we could fix them and keep moving. This maintenance advantage compounded over time. American armored divisions maintained higher operational readiness rates throughout sustained campaigns because their maintenance systems functioned efficiently. German armored units experienced declining readiness as maintenance backlogs accumulated, spare parts inventories depleted, and trained technicians became casualties or were transferred to other units. By 1945, many German Panther battalions operated at 30 to 40% readiness, meaning 2/3 of their authorized strength sat non-operational awaiting repairs. American Sherman battalions typically maintained 70 to 80% readiness, ensuring consistent combat power availability. May 8, 1945. Victory in Europe Day. The guns fell silent across the European continent as Germany surrendered unconditionally. In maintenance depots, supply dumps, and battle-scarred fields from Normandy to the Elbe River, thousands of Sherman tanks sat as testament to American industrial might and tactical pragmatism. Scattered among them, relatively few captured Panthers remained, mechanical curiosities that had proven impressive in specifications but inadequate in practice. The debate about American tankers preferring Shermans over Panthers would continue for decades in historical analyses and military studies. Post-war critics would emphasize Sherman casualties, arguing that American commanders needlessly sacrificed lives by deploying inferior equipment. These criticisms contained truth. The Sherman's vulnerabilities were real, and American tankers paid in blood for those deficiencies. However, these analyses often miss the holistic reality that combat veterans understood instinctively. Colonel Creighton Abrams, promoted to brigadier general by war's end, addressed this question directly in his post-war reports to Army ground forces. The Sherman succeeded not despite its limitations, but because of its systematic advantages. He wrote, "Reliability, maintainability, crew survivability, production capacity, logistical sustainability, and training efficiency combined to create a weapon system more effective than its individual components suggested. The Panther offered superior firepower and protection, but failed in every other dimension. That matters in sustained warfare." Our crews recognized this reality from practical experience. The numbers supported Abrams' assessment. American armored divisions advanced from Normandy to central Germany in 11 months, maintaining offensive pressure throughout. German armored forces, equipped with technically superior Panthers and Tigers, fought a grinding retreat marked by increasing mechanical attrition and declining combat effectiveness. The correlation between technical superiority and battlefield success proved weaker than many theorists predicted. Lieutenant Colonel Wilson published comprehensive analysis through the Armored School at Fort Knox in 1946, examining why American tankers rejected captured Panthers. His conclusion emphasized systems thinking over individual component assessment. A tank, he argued, does not fight alone. It exists within an ecosystem of supply, maintenance, training, doctrine, and combined arms integration. The Sherman optimized for that ecosystem. The Panther, for all its impressive specifications, could not function effectively outside the German system that produced it, a system that collapsed under allied pressure. The captured Panther's fate illustrated this reality. American units that experimented with operating captured Panthers universally reported negative experiences. The tanks broke down frequently. Spare parts were unavailable. Maintenance required expertise American crews lacked. Ammunition resupply proved problematic because the Panther's 75mm ammunition differed from standard American stocks. Most tellingly, crews reported feeling isolated and vulnerable operating vehicles that looked like German tanks, facing friendly fire risks from American aircraft and artillery that might not recognize the captured vehicles as friendly. Sergeant Lafayette Poole, who survived the war with an extraordinary record of tank kills and multiple tank losses, reflected on the Sherman versus Panther question during post-war interviews. The Panther looked fearsome, and it was dangerous in the right circumstances. But I trusted my Sherman. I knew it would start every morning. I knew if something broke, we could fix it or get a replacement quickly. I knew if we took a hit, we had good odds of getting out alive. I knew our supply system would keep us fueled, armed, and operational. The Panther? It was a gamble every time. Might work perfectly, might break down catastrophically, might leave you stranded without support. In combat, certainty and reliability matter more than specifications on paper. The American armor experience in World War II validated a broader principle about military technology: adequacy available in overwhelming numbers defeats excellence available in limited quantities. The Sherman represented conscious design choices that prioritize production, operation, and sustainment over ultimate performance. Those choices proved correct in the context of industrial warfare, where strategic victory required maintaining continuous pressure over extended time and distance. By war's end, American doctrine had evolved to incorporate these lessons explicitly. Post-war tank development emphasized reliability, maintainability, and logistical sustainability alongside firepower and protection. The M26 Pershing heavy tank, introduced near war's end with heavier armor and a more powerful 90mm gun, still maintained Sherman drive systems for reliability and ease of maintenance. American armor doctrine continued emphasizing combined arms integration rather than relying on technical superiority in individual platforms. The captured Panthers, those impressive machines that American tankers examined and ultimately rejected, became footnotes to history. A few survive in museums, testament to German engineering sophistication and wartime industrial achievement. But they also serve as reminders that sophisticated engineering alone does not guarantee military success. The American tankers, who preferred their death-trap Shermans over superior Panthers, understood a truth that transcends specifications and technical comparisons in war. The weapon system that keeps fighting wins, regardless of whether it theoretically should. The Sherman, for all its flaws and vulnerabilities, kept fighting. It crossed oceans, sustained campaigns, absorbed losses, and maintained pressure until victory. The Panther, magnificent in specifications, could not match that sustained effectiveness. The verdict belonged not to engineers or theorists, but to the men who fought in both vehicles and chose reliability over sophistication, sustainability over temporary superiority, and systematic advantages over individual excellence.